Greetings. Welcome to the fourth class in this second semester of the Emerald Choral Academy. I am Gary Cannon, the artistic director of the Emerald Ensemble, a professional choir based in Seattle. The Emerald Choral Academy is a series of interactive webinars during which our area's leading professional choristers reveal their personal tricks of the trade to community singers. These webinars are then made available freely to singers across the world via YouTube. The Emerald Ensemble is very grateful to our generous donors and organizations who have made this project possible, including For Culture and the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. We encourage anyone participating or viewing this webinar to make a donation as you are able at emeraldensemble.org. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and join our mailing list to hear about future sessions of the Academy and the other activities of the Emerald Ensemble. This webinar is being recorded. By participating, you are granting the Emerald Ensemble permission to share your contribution. Your microphones and cameras will remain off for the duration of the presentation. You can, however, ask questions to the presenter by typing into the chat or Q&A features at the bottom of your screen. And periodically, I will interject to field your questions to our presenter today. Today, the Emerald Ensemble is very excited to welcome Ryan Bede into our musical family for the first time. Ryan is one of the Northwest's leading baritone soloists, singing with troops across the area. I've sung with him, I've conducted with him, and he's always a charm and a pleasure and a consummate musician. Ryan is based in Tacoma, where he teaches at Seattle Pacific University and Tacoma Community College. And his topic today is vocal emergencies, something I'm looking forward to learning a lot about. It is a great pleasure to introduce to you my colleague, Ryan Bede.
Good afternoon, and hello to our viewers from all across the globe. I understand. I already saw one greeting from Costa Rica, and I just am so honored and privileged that Gary and Scott asked me to be with you today and join you on this topic of vocal emergencies. Now, just by the mention of the word emergency, right, it raises our red flags a little bit. And one of my goals with you today is to go through some tips and strategies. I try to emphasize often in my own teaching, and also, over and over to myself, because as singers and performers, we have to be, we're the constant curator and caretaker of this instrument that lives in our throat. The mention of the word emergency threatens to create a little bit of panic, but one of my goals today is to help you allay some of those worries, and to let you know at which times other courses of action might be necessary, and at which times we can find some tips and strategies to make our rehearsal or practice session, or if it comes to that, performance happen with the same or similar degree of success that we would hope in any circumstance. So I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which I will be referring to all of the time for the duration of the webinar. So I'm going to switch to that presentation now. Get to my part of... There we go. I think everyone should be able to see this. So we begin with the idea that our instrument is our body. We're unlike a trumpet player or a flutist, or certainly a pianist, where the instrument that we play, at the end of the day, we can't just walk away from it or put it in its box or in a case, or just walk out of the studio away from the piano. We carry our instrument in our body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So proper care of the body and proper care of the voice really do go hand in hand. And there are lots of things that we will encounter today, which seem very intuitive, that make a whole lot of sense, just about activities of daily living. But that's some of that is in this presentation to reassure you that some of the things that we consider just as good habits for living as human beings are an excellent start for our journey as taking good care of our voices. So the top two um, aspects of vocal hygiene that are head and shoulders above the rest are the fact that we need to be well hydrated and we need to be well rested. The vocal folds themselves are structures that depend on a certain presence of mucus and lubrication, several layered structures, a bit of which we will dive into today, which require that fluid to keep them working in the way that we want them to. Now, that's not to say when you drink a cup of water or have a sports drink or something like that the fluid itself, of course, isn't touching our vocal folds, but and thankfully, it's more on the systemic level, hydrating your body, you're hydrating your voice. So just as a nice reminder, we like to suggest that we strive to have 8 to 12 glasses of water per day. This, of course, is depending upon your activity level. If you're an active person, for one, I enjoy going out for rides on my bicycle. So on days that I know I'm going to be cycling, and possibly also singing, of course, that hydration goal would increase to match the demand on the system. So there are a number of things that we can take in liquid form that do the opposite of hydrating our body and our tissues. And among those are, of course, our Seattle favorite of a nice cup of coffee, which, of course, under normal circumstances contains caffeine. Caffeine and alcohol both are diuretics, meaning that the fluid that we take in those forms essentially filters right through our body without being very adequately absorbed. So we can't rely on those fluids for adequate hydration. I will mention again over the course of the next hour or so several times, but a good goal when thinking about fluid intake, if you are going to have your cups of coffee in the morning, is to always make sure that you replace ounce for ounce. And I suppose this goes for other beverages too. You replace ounce for ounce those beverages that you have taken in that may be dehydrating in favor of ones that will rehydrate. Now, a bit of good news: our vocal mechanism aperture is a group of cartilages and muscles and tissues, and just like many other structures in the body, they're naturally resilient. They will respond to, especially to rest, for recovery, not unlike resting another muscle before expecting it to do your work in the fitness gym tomorrow. You might want to take a bit of time off from using those muscles this evening. I wanted to mention briefly about the structure of what we'll talk about the larynx and things in a bit of detail in a few minutes. But I think it's pertinent to mention now that the outer layer of our vocal folds are much like the smooth skin with a bit of flexibility on the top of the hand, and the 3 layers of the vocal folds are more like the meatier portion on the inside of our hand here. So there's 3 layers of that lamina propria, it's called, and then we have the epithelial layer on the outside. The presence of lubrication is vital in between these layers. So the hydration piece is really extremely significant. I want to call attention to maintaining regular sleep patterns. As performers, whether we're choristers or soloists or doing performances in bars or farmers markets or wherever it is that our performance activities are taking us, sometimes the schedule of those performances and rehearsals on the grand scheme of waking in the morning to going to sleep in the evening for most people might stretch the norms of the hours. Maintaining regular sleep patterns is really really a strong suggestion when it comes to maintaining proper vocal fitness. And also to avoid using your voice in a straining fashion, especially when your body's tired. You know, when we're tired, our muscles of all uh, different types will try to compensate, and we don't want to put our vocal mechanism in the position of having to compensate or wanting to compensate to create that familiar feeling, familiar sensation that we're used to in singing. So as a reminder, a fatigued body does equal a fatigued voice, and that our bodies are instruments. I provided a short list of sort of vocal do's and don'ts several days ago that I know that Gary and Scott posted for your viewing, so that you might find a bit more specific information there. Moving on, the notion that our speaking voice and our singing voice are one and the same. Using proper speaking habits in our non-singing time is really one of the best courses of action to prepare our singing voice for when it wants to be used in that way. I mentioned here, you are a vocal professional. The moment you decided to join a choir, take an audition for an opera, community theater presentation, join a garage band where you're going to be singing, whatever this is, you are a vocal professional. You have taken time out of your existence and life, whether or not singing is the source of your financial livelihood or not. You are encouraged to take ownership of the fact that we are, like I said, kind of curator and caretaker of this instrument that lives in our throat. And sort of on the negative side, poor speaking habits really do detrimentally affect our singing voice. Speaking with decreased breath energy, this is something that I alluded to here with excessive vocal fry. In some circles, it's seen sometimes as even fashionable or desirable to sort of speak down in one's vocal fry on the bottom of the register. And I hope you could hear that demonstration I did there. Essentially, we're talking about the first register of the human voice. The registration and all these sort of things are topics for another day, though extremely engaging and interesting, I can assure you. But speaking down in that low place, low frequency for an extended period of time is really not therapeutic at all for the notion of a healthy singing voice. Also, holding unnecessary tension in our necks and tongues and jaws. We're, in the case of the tongue and jaw, we're talking about the articulators, the last step before the sound emits from our mouths, and that really can serve to tangle things up if we're not careful. And all of these things can predispose the vocal folds themselves to developing conditions such as vocal nodules, nodes, and more serious things. There exists vocal cysts and all kinds of a run of quite frightening sounding afflictions. But the good news is we can do a lot to avoid the occurrence and recurrence of those conditions. So just a few suggestions what to do. Speak with modulated inflection. Try to let your voice travel with the expression of how you're talking. Now the second point was one that played a great deal into my sort of journey as a singer. When my voice first changed in my middle teens, it went from really high to fairly low, seemingly overnight, and then probably for the subsequent several years, I spoke in a very low vocal register. And when we're low in our register, our chords are short and they're thick, and they act a certain way. The higher we go, the longer and thinner they become. But we're looking for optimal sound production, and a lack of undue stress. And also trying not to speak for long periods of time in noisy environments. Now, I know this is obviously something that has changed a little bit over the last year. We haven't had the occasion to gather in noisy environments, and I would go so far as to say that probably has benefited us as voice users. But that's just a bit of advice moving forward. So before we go any further, I just want to leave a moment if there have been any questions or anything, or if we can press on, that's all right too.
Yeah, don't see any questions from the folks here
Okay.
yet, but I'd invite them to write as
Please.
needed. I do have a couple though, if I
Please.
may, along these lines. You talked about unnecessary tension in the neck and tongue and jaw area. When you can observe that you have that tension, are there one or two certain exercises that you do to relax that?
I'm so glad you asked. This is something that is really has come up a lot recently. Now, I'm sure I'm not giving brand new information to everyone in the room when I say that the root, the back of the tongue, where the tongue attaches to the hyoid bone at the back of the back of the jaw here, there the tongue is one of the body's strongest muscles. So trying to figure out a way that one maneuver exercise, if you want to call it that I like to suggest is underneath the front of the mandible here, of the bottom part of your jaw. You can do a bit of a thumb massage of that. The root of the tongue is there, and if you just experiment a little bit and say ah, ah, you should still be able to manipulate and maneuver that that tissue kind of up and down. It shouldn't be tense like a tight rubber band. You can do a little bit of several muscles. One of them is the masseter muscle that runs up and down here. So just a little bit of opening the jaw open and a little bit of massage here. There's a muscle that pairs with the muscle along the side of the jaw that's found inside the mouth. But I think more than ever, I've been cautioned, sort of with caution, not to to do that sort of self massage, not knowing what might be on our paws. But yeah, that's one thing for the tongue. And I really emphasize the benefit of directional neck stretching, straight, sort of straight down and straight back, and using side to side maneuvers. And if you are going to roll the neck from side to side, just to go back and forth, sort of swinging a pendulum in the front, and then to drop it back and swinging the pendulum in the back. It's where we sometimes run into problems with sort of the full revolution neck rolls, although it might create a few seemingly therapeutic cracks and pops. We also can run into some negative issues with that. So I always try to suggest back and forth in the front and back, but not necessarily going around.
That's excellent. I'm going to steal those just for life, not just for
Sure.
singing.
Yes.
Then one other question regarding the optimum speaking range.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find that? How did you find yours?
That's a really good question. I mean, I actually will allude to this when I'm talking about a sort of the voice team a little bit later in the webinar. I once had an evaluation done by a speech language therapist, a speech language pathologist, where they have you read a passage in three different ways. They have you pretend you're reading a passage over you're a loudspeaker or something like that. And then they have you just read it in, sort of normal conversation. And then they have you speak it. I think it was something like as if you're telling a story to a child. And when you tell a story to a child, you modulate your voice more and more to keep the attention and energy of a younger mind. And I learned through getting the results of that examination and talking to some professionals in that area that the healthiest place for our speaking voice is usually somewhere between the conversational level and the, we'll say, speaking to a child, telling a story to a child register, not necessarily at all that loudspeaker register, even though that could seem counterintuitive because when we think of, especially a lower operatic classically trained voice, it really does kind of sound like if you were to start speaking that it would sort of just sound like this all the time. And there's definitely a certain resonance to that latter example that I just gave, but it doesn't create the when we sing, we are putting a planned and prescribed extra effort on our vocal folds, but we're putting extra effort on our vocal folds. So if you spoke the entire time the way you sang, your singing voice would also tire quickly.
All right, thank you. Let's press on.
Sure,
That's wonderful. Thank you.
absolutely. So we take this step towards the idea of hoarseness in the voice. When we hear things like, your voice sounds a little bit more breathy than you're used to. You hear different, you perceive a different effect in the ear when, because we hear ourselves talk, we hear ourselves sing through our own filter all the time. So we really are intimately aware of what we're normally used to hearing and feeling. One of the source books that I've consulted over and over and over again is Mary Beth Bunch Damey's The Dynamics of the Singing Voice. So when I say Bunch 155, that's from her book. She says that hoarseness is nature's signal to rest the voice. When you have hoarseness, in many situations, we have laryngitis. We have inflammation of the larynx. Now, I know we've all been hearing the word laryngitis from childhood. When you are hoarse, when you are not able to give the normal tone that you're accustomed to, and this is, starting from a speaking standpoint here, you may observe that the voice sounds raspy. It sounds breathier. Think about it this way: as the air comes through your vocal cords, if we have not enough, we have too much air coming through, we don't have good closure of the vocal cords, right? Too much air is getting through, right? So we're going to hear a breathier sound, right? And that comes from not having what we call enough subglottic pressure. Okay, now not having enough subglottic pressure could result from those tissues being inflamed. So we want to be really, really very careful when we feel hoarse. Sometimes it's someone else notices. If you have a voice teacher, or say you're in a small quartet or something like that, you might have another set of ears that hears, your sound a bit under your normal power today. Are you feeling okay? Or something like that. That sometimes other folks' cues can be really, really helpful to us. Hoarseness is caused by some change in the edges of the vocal folds. I want to take a moment here, hope you can see my hands, to talk about the way that the vocal folds oscillate with each other. So imagine that the air is coming in from your lungs down below, right? We've got the folds are oscillating like this in kind of a vertical wave, right? So for a long time we've talked about this idea, and if you look down on with a laryngoscope or something like that, that's how you will you see the chords in this sort of orientation. But really talking about how the as you see the surfaces of my hands touch, you really can see how the vocal folds act with each other. So somewhere in the edge there's some inflammation. There may be not closing evenly, and that could certainly be the sign of another issue, which we would not be adequately equipped to know just by the feel. But this could be as simple as due to a cold or allergy, or it could be more severe and in some sort of disorder that is present there. And in more extreme cases, some sort of nerve issue. There are motor nerves that act on the extrinsic and intrinsic muscles of the larynx, that's outside and inside muscles of the larynx itself, that really do send the signals to the folds to vibrate. I will say that I feel very strongly about the concept that anytime that you have hoarseness for any more than 10 days, let's even move that back and say 7 to 10 days, that investigation by your healthcare provider, starting with your primary physician, is really vital. We are all voice users day to day to day, even if we're not singers. Most of us, if not all of us here today, are singers, right? So it's even one more level. We are high intensity voice users. Allergies can cause this hoarseness. We have lots of allergens in our air right now. Seattle Spring is, and many other places as well, are notorious for pollen and dust more in the summer. And certainly air that is not free of pollutants. Um, Also, environments where it might be smoky could create irritants for the folds and cause hoarseness. Also, we're very mercifully now moving out of what is typically the cold season, but the membranes in the vocal tract, your vocal tract includes essentially everything from the larynx outwards, right? So if you have a sore throat, if you have a stuffy nose, if you're coughing, there's I mean, yes, coughing, the impetus to cough comes from lower, but there's involvement in the membranes within the vocal tract that can create an imbalance and change of situation from what we're used to. So my charge to you is to really take care when it comes to hoarseness in the voice. When you are ill, this is as I said in the beginning, good suggestions for daily life as human beings often cross right across into good suggestions for life as singers. But especially when we're ill, knowing that under some of those circumstances that we may need to want to sing in certain ways. Um, the idea that going back to getting plenty of rest and hydration, of course, but also to take it one step further and saying to speak really as infrequently as you can. If you are someone who works a job during the day where you have to be speaking, and then in the evening you could then go to rehearsal and sing for 2 or 2.5 hours, that's a quite heavy, what we call vocal dose. So be sure to moderate and mitigate the effect on your speaking and singing voice as much as possible. If you're functioning at a less than 100%, I sort of informally tell my singers a lot that you're going to feel less than 100% about 80% of the time, just with that notion of how rarely do we wake up and start that vocalizing and say, well, I'm having just the greatest vocal day that I can remember. That we're back to the fact that we live with this instrument inside our bodies. We just have to make sure that we're taking good care of it. Drinking plenty of fluids, and anything that creates dryness is going to increase the discomfort. Now, when you're not singing, throat lozenges and things like that. I mentioned a few slippery elm and a few other remedies there on the right. For your well-being and well-feeling during the day, these are really excellent things to do. Medicated lozenges are something to be careful with. Kind of a don't do, if you ask if you ask me, when it comes to in conjunction with singing itself. But avoiding loud throat clearing is really a thing. When you clear your throat with an audible sound, those vocal folds are really quite literally slamming together, right? And you're creating other compensatory tension in the vocal tract that is also contributing to that gesture. So my go-to suggestion with throat clearing is the idea of dropping your chin to your chest and swallowing quite hard. Imagine you're trying to get that that piece of medicine or something down that's going to you really want to make sure you swallow good. That will keep you from loudly throat clearing. We're going to talk about some exercises a little bit later that you also can do to to try to clear up. But I put in bold here to be be considerate to other singers. I'm with the knowledge that this seminar is attended by many choristers and the type of proximity with which we stand to each other, at least pre-COVID. The idea of singing when you're ill, going to rehearsal, choosing to sing, these are all decisions that we have to really, really make very carefully now more than ever. You know, for some of us, singing is our livelihood. It's our source of income. It's our and all of those things. So there certainly can be anxiety and stress that's created by that instance when you're not feeling well and you feel like you still have to sing. When we are close to other people, though, this is something to really to be cautious of, because as we've seen in the science of about the last year, close proximity to each other is something that has created has exacerbated some serious problems. So something to be aware of. In the vein here of decongestant medication, do beware that many of these medications are further drying. And back to that first principle of hydration and how important it is. You may be taking, in for the benefit of a different, relief from a symptom, you might be taking your vocal ability in a different direction than it would be if you were able to go without those. But as always, your healthcare provider is the one to consult with these things. I did want to emphasize very quickly the importance of the ABC rule. I refer to this often. Vitamin A is very important to our mucous membrane health as a whole system, but you can translate that to our voice. And B vitamins, I mentioned a moment ago about anxiety and stress. Now, when we're feeling not 100%, you have to go to rehearsal, you have a performance, creates that elevated psychological level there. So amping up on your vitamins when you're ill, a multivitamin, or and moving on to vitamin C. It's really one of the most vital keys to healing of the immune response, and also to help with future immunity to things that might come our way. But I need to sing today. I have a rehearsal. It's 4:39 p.m. and I need to be in a rehearsal at 6:30 and I need to sing. What do I need to do? What can I do? Hydrate. Drink your water. Over the course of the day, if you have been doing a good job hydrating with only water, you may wish to add something simple as a bit of ginger, or I like a slice of lime, or a lemon or something like that. Being a little careful, of course, if you've ever had negative experiences with acid reflux, you have to be your own caretaker there. I mentioned this notion of vocal naps. Gary mentioned in the beginning that I'm a vocal teacher, and I use my singing voice and my speaking voice for many hours of the day. So I really try to take time where I just don't make any noise, right? And that sometimes that takes a lot of extra effort. You might have to find an activity that distracts you in another way that you're unlikely to be using your voice. So to the singing itself, a slow focused warm-up is really going to be a good measuring tool as to what your vocal capability will be for the day. Starting with, there's a family, I believe they've currently decided, I think maybe there are 13 or so different postures of this exercises that are called semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. That's SOVTEs. There are 3 ways in which we can hum on an M as in Mary, on an N as in Nancy, and on an NG as in the end of the word hung. There's a different phonetic symbol for that one, but it wasn't present on my keyboard, so excuse me for that. We also have this notion of what we call a lip trill, and a nice gentle posture with the producing of a vocal tone, just consisting of kind of buzzing your lips in a very relaxed yet efficient way, sort of just sliding through. It doesn't even really need to be much more than a few steps of an interval just to start, just to get the the muscles working together, get the breath working together. You can also do this on a tongue trill or a rolled R. Now, many folk cannot lip trill. Many folks cannot roll their R's. That's all okay, right? We're going to give multiple ways to get to our goal. I did want to mention this idea of the raspberry, right? Because I think sometimes that gets associated with the kind of sort of blowing of, say like a brass player would buzz. But what we're talking about here is putting your tongue in between your teeth and expelling air that way in the very similar way to if you would slide on an M, slide on an M, slide on an NG, do a tongue trill or lip trill. Now, with the two remaining postures that I mentioned here, I'm going to do a bit of a demonstration here for a moment. I have my water bottle here. When it comes to water bubbling, what we mean is we want to take a straw. When it comes to straw activities, the material of the straw and the length of the straw make minimal differences when it comes to the effect of the exercise. But what does make a difference is the diameter of the straw. This is a fairly regular drinking straw. I might use a little larger drinking straw if I were to focus on these water bubbles. But for the purpose now, we'll just say this. I'm going to take my drinking straw and submerge it 2 inches or so into the water, and then just kind of do a. Now I was staying all on one pitch doing that, but you can modulate that a little bit. Good. And in another day in another lecture, I would be emphasizing as a good tool to work on breath energy for the repertoire that we sing, that you sort of phonate your passages from your music through your straw, through water bubbling, first few notes of the Hallelujah chorus bass part or something like that. Okay, so we can create ties to things that our minds know when it comes to these exercises. And then the last posture that I mentioned here is straw phonation itself. Now we can use the straw as a medium to do these slides. Something to check is that you're getting a good seal around the straw without becoming tight, that you have a nice relaxed tongue position behind your bottom teeth. Think of an ah position on the inside. And also that we're not letting air go escaping through our nose. And it's less about thinking about the straw as if you were playing a musical instrument, blowing air through it. It's creating the environment that we're used to, just singing a tone, but filtering that tone through the straw rather than through an open cavity. And to probably radically oversimplify the efficacy and benefit of these activities, it's that when we sing with our mouths open, which is how we customarily are singing, all of the energy is going out. And it's all pressure going out this way. By semi-occluding or partially closing the cavity, we are creating some sort of compensatory vibration, if you will, back towards the vocal folds themselves, which can be very therapeutic and helpful in our using of our vocal tone. Okay, the idea of marking is not that of under supporting or under energizing. It's just giving the muscles a bit of a bit of a rest without whispering. I haven't mentioned yet, but the idea of whispering is really fairly detrimental to the voice because you're pushing way more air through it, and we think we're being gentle on our voice when we whisper. But going from our say we're delivering dialogue on stage and our tone level might be something like this, moving it back to a gentle conversation, which I try to remind myself all the time over Zoom, that you don't have to project because the microphone's right there, to even just a very light you can think about a little bit more of a side sort of tone. In this the tone color balance, we call this the oscuro as opposed to the chiaro, the bright part of the voice. Just being a little bit gentler on the voice without whispering, right? Because we want to focus on causing those vocal cords folds to come together, right? Now, performance considerations, it's different if it's of a rehearsal from a performance. Even in the professional operatic arena, marking and rehearsal is done all the time. Many of you have probably been to a dress rehearsal, maybe even a performance itself, when there wasn't an understudy or cover or something of that variety, where an announcement was made that the singer would not be singing at full volume. This is something that is totally acceptable. There are certain situations like the one music rehearsal with the orchestra, or things where we need to, as much as possible, mimic the conditions that are going to be on stage. And of course, you would want to be very careful if that rehearsal or something of that variety fell at a time when you were not feeling 100%. The next thing is having a cool down routine. Now, an E vowel, okay, on our spectrum of vowels, the E vowel is at one extreme and the U vowel is at the other extreme. We have E's and A's that are mostly, we talk about those being produced by movements of the tongue, and then O and U are produced more by the movements of the lips. So a really gentle, descending is easier on the voice than ascending. That's a good rule for warm-up exercises as well as cool down. So I often will get in the car after a rehearsal or a performance and just have the straw, or I do a really simple, ooh, ooh, again, not whispering, but not necessarily ooh, right? We want to be gentle on the voice as a cool down, not unlike how you might if you were cooling down after a workout. Be cautious of the medications and remedies that you may be taking, even if they're not dealing with something that you are, experiencing, an allergy or cold or something like that. There are many, many medications that are taken for other things that can create less than ideal situations for the voice. In extreme circumstances, there do exist measures such as other medications, up to and including steroids. This is only under the guidance of a physician, preferably a laryngologist, who we're going to talk in a few moments here just about what a voice care team means. Someone who intimately knows the workings of our speaking and singing voices, who can best guide us as to what the trade-off is. Sometimes we can simplify it as to saying, an ounce of this to get you to sing today could create, a longer recovery on the other end or something like that. So you want to really exercise a high level of caution when it comes to approaching circumstances where you might be looking for, a quick fix or a band-aid to put, the possibility of singing today back into your body. All right. I just want to pause for another moment here just for questions that have come up, and also to sort of check in at how we're doing with our pacing.
Pacing is always fun in
Yes, it
music
certainly
and
is.
as well as in anything, right? I think we're okay for all. I just have one
Excellent.
question regarding the topic of drinking water.
Sure.
My understanding is that, or not, I should preface that differently. Very often one sees singers in a rehearsal, particularly young singers who have their designated bottled water, and they sense their voice is getting sore, and so they'll down the water, thinking that will soothe the voice. But the location where the vocal folds do their massage, or as you're saying, is closed off by the glottis, so that water is just going right past it.
Correct. I think that's a really important designation to make, because something that hasn't come up yet today, but Gary, I know you and I we're talking about this in our back and forth in preparation for today, is the idea of what are the things that we're ingesting, by food or drink. One of the things I think we hear from singers a lot is, oh, I can't have dairy, or I can't have orange juice, or I can't have, whatever, or I like to have a plate of chicken and potatoes, or I like to not have this within the day before singing. these are all individual, the things that we, can learn about ourselves, certainly. But you're right. These substances are not going onto the vocal cords. The epiglottis closes over the top of the trachea, where the vocal folds are really a door to the trachea, right? It's a set of of drapes to probably make much too light of the situation there. But hydration in the moment, like you're talking about, if it's soreness that we're getting towards, that water really isn't going to help the soreness go away. Sometimes it's like, you have a bit of a tickle in the throat, right? And I went back to, the loud throat clearing and coughing and everything like that. Sometimes that, just the act of that harder swallowing can really help clear that, that sensation. But as far as getting to a sore throat, um, you know, that's that taking in water is not going to give that immediate effect. It's really important to reiterate, I think, that hydration is sort of a cumulative, effort. You know what I mean? We hydrate our body, so we hydrate our voice. If you have been doing a really, you went out for a 2 or 3 day hiking trip and you didn't hydrate appropriately, and then on the day you came home you had to go to a choir rehearsal, the hydration that you increased, maybe you said, well, I've got to go to rehearsal at 2, it's 10 a.m, maybe I should try to do my 10 or 12 glasses of water in the next 3 hours. Never mind the fact your rehearsal experience might not be so comfortable. You're not giving your body that hydration at the right time.
I've heard it said that, and you can confirm or deny this.
Sure.
I don't mean it as a suggestion.
Oh, no.
One person who had suggested gargling warm water with a kind of lemon something to it. That worked for them.
Yeah.
Have you heard of other things like that to address the immediate sore throat?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things that remedies that from warm liquids are, as a rule, warm liquids are nicer on our voice than extremely hot or extremely cold, right? Think about extremely cold, for instance. Think about an ice water, right? Where you've got those nice big cubes that come out of your refrigerator ice dispenser. That water is really, really very cold. Now, one thing that cold does to our body is it causes vasoconstriction. It causes, vessels to get smaller, right? And we want the tissues of our voice to be, to be supple and, and not to, to tighten up, right? So, and a very hot bit of liquid could also create sort of uncomfortable burning. I have heard people who've said that, a lot of the, the balance in our body is acid base, is pH balance. So, something with, with that lemon, that's a bit of an acidic thing. That might work for singer A, who doesn't have any acid reflux problems. It might work not well at all for singer B, who any citrus fruit or anything, could create some other situations. Sometimes as a remedy for certain conditions. I know apple cider vinegar is swallowed. I personally, for me, the idea of gargling something with apple cider vinegar does not sound too pleasurable to me. But I know there are apple cider vinegar in its raw, sort of unfiltered, if I'm not mistaken, unfiltered state is a bit of a natural, almost, it has a probiotic. You can see some of these natural cider vinegars that have have stuff at the bottom, not unlike a kombucha or something like that. So that I know that there are preferences. I mean, mentioning kombucha, I happen to really enjoy the ginger flavor. The ginger is a really nice and natural anti-inflammatory. I like the kombucha taste, so I sometimes shake up some of my fluid intake with something like that. And if it's not made from caffeinated tea, it's not going to be too diuretic or dehydrating for you.
Great, thanks very much.
Sure.
Let's hooray.
Okay.
Let's keep learning.
Okay, awesome. Onward. Okay, so as we say to ourselves, I'm going to sing today, right? Well, I'm going to. Oh, I think I I think I might have accidentally taken out a slide. I am so sorry. I had one that I erroneously removed, and then I will have to add this back in. I'm totally fine with just speaking about these, but I really wanted to show you my picture. So I'm going to take a moment here and see if I can pull this from.
Brian, I may have that available since you emailed it to me earlier,
And I didn't even realize that this had happened until just now.
because I think the version that you sent to me does have that, and I have it up right now.
Awesome.
So
Well, maybe
why
I
don't
can.
we see if we can switch and
Yeah.
do you want
Sorry
me to
for the
email that to you
error
real
there.
quick, or I can share my screen, or how do you want
Okay, I
to?
stopped sharing mine, so you can share
Okay,
yours. I apologize, folks, for the slight delay here.
let's
What
see
happens when
if
you edit your PowerPoints?
well, and it's been all of what a year that we've all been in Zoom. You'd think we'd learned the
Hmm.
technology by now. I sure
Yeah.
haven't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, let's see if I still worry whenever I share a screen that I'm sharing the right one.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Okay, here's this. Um,
Okay, so yes, and several, and not that one down below where you are, but several down, maybe three down. You see this large picture? Yes, right here. Okay, so this is a situation where one of the vocal folds does have a hemorrhage, right? That's what the red is here. It really can be caused by phonotrauma. But what I want to emphasize is that here we are looking down from above, right? So as if you were looking down the throat with a laryngoscope, this is how you would see the folds touching each other. Now they're coming together, on completely on one end and not fully on the other end, but just the idea of our vocal cords oscillating, vibrating together is what creates our tone, right? When we're right around middle C, it's a little bit over 200 hertz. A 440 is something that we're accustomed to hearing, the A above middle C. um, is 440 hertz, and a soprano singing high C, C6, is over 1,000 hertz. That means over 1,000 times that is going per second. So naturally, when we're talking about vocal examination by a physician, there needs to be some technology that really can speed up quite a bit. If you go down one slide here, we have I this that very much need to thank University of Pittsburgh, I guess, for the PowerPoint I was taking this from. This is a um, flexible sort of laryngoscopy. This is how they would do video stroboscopy. The laryngologist can look down the back of our throats with a camera, and in the course of this exam, they would have you phonate. They would have you say E, usually E. Actually, they sometimes take a hold of your tongue or have you take a hold of your tongue and say E. That's more for the rigid exam through the mouth. But they're able to evaluate how your folds are closing with each other, and would be able to tell us if there was something amiss. Now, I should say, as I launch into this, is I'm not positive that looking at the miniatures here, I'm not sure that my slide about laryngologists themselves made it in. I want to make sure I talk about this. We can go down a couple of slides here just for the benefit of not having to look at this unfortunate circumstance that has arisen in the larynx of the subject of these photos. Um, but creating a situation where you have a laryngologist who knows your voice. I have children, so I'm very familiar with the idea of a well child exam. You take your child to the doctor, to the pediatrician one time a year, or however it is, just to check them out, not in the situation where they're ill, but rather when they're well, or at least mostly so. That is really an excellent entry point for developing a relationship with a laryngologist. Now, a laryngologist is a specially trained otolaryngologist. Sometimes we see this abbreviated ENT for ear, nose, and throat, right? Mostly all of the structures that we're talking about here. And that, I think, I always like to mention that the fact that we say ENT does reinforce the ear's connection to everything that we do as singers, right? Obviously, we have our nasopharynx behind our nose and we have our oropharynx behind our mouth. So the fact that they're specialized in those areas is really very, very helpful and vital to us. But a laryngologist, him or herself, yes, this is it. A general otolaryngologist can be very helpful for us when it comes to allergies or sinus problems or things like that, or even hearing issues. Down to the point of, I've worked with several vocal students that over the course of our voice lesson journey, they've been evaluated by their doctor and subsequently by an ENT physician and found that the hearing something was amiss in their hearing, and that could very well have something to do with, pitch issues or something like that. So you never know what you're going to discover. As the typical process will probably involve going to your general practitioner and discussing your desire to be referred to a laryngologist who can help you with these things. Sometimes you have to see the ENT physician in the interim, and then I hope that you will have the opportunity to arrive at a care relationship with a laryngologist specifically. They have taken extended training in voice, disorders of the voice, swallowing. The term head and neck surgery also is involved in this discipline. And when they go down your throat with one of these two cameras. The top is a flexible scope. The bottom was a rigid scope. They're able to see the function of the vocal cords and even make a recording. You too can have a video of what your vocal cords look like while you are phonating. And that's a really, really, very instructive and, nice tool to have at your disposal. For those that are a bit hesitant to see some of the more demonstrative pictures in the medical field, you might not want that video. But for those of us who have spent time in the physiology and study of the vocal mechanism, it's really very instructive and interesting. I included several suggestions in the handout for a very respected area of voice care practitioners. The voice team, really in the instance of a vocal nodule or a polyp or a cyst or more severe, your care team would likely consist of a laryngologist physician, potentially a speech language pathologist, possibly a specially trained voice teacher. There exists a special a designation known as a singing voice specialist, where voice teachers have taken a large amount of hours of both in-person or hands-on fellowship training, as well as lots of anatomy training to help habilitate and rehabilitate. Yes, vocologists, an excellent. This is the word that we assign to these professionals, and that trifecta or triad between a voice teacher who focuses on the singing voice, a speech language pathologist who focuses mainly on the speaking voice, and the laryngology physician who's really in the driver's seat and has the controls, can really tell us what is the best course of action. Now, the really, really good news, I didn't include any of the pictures or specifics today about some of these disorders, nodules and cysts and polyps and things like this, that we certainly could revisit this topic at another point. But the good news about some of the more mild situations there is that vocal rest is one of the prescriptions that is given by these physicians and speech language pathologists, just to let the voice and the body heal itself in ways. Yes, there are some times where there needs to be procedures done, but vocal rest will usually be one of the first recommended actions when it comes to healing of these vocal ailments. And I mention all of these with the strong encouragement of, when you are sick, singing is, if you were saying to yourself, I'm sick, should I sing? Not to be over dramatic about it, but the answer in a nutshell is no. You need to be cognizant of singing well, You know what I mean? For the folks around you, for the health of your vocal instrument on a long-term basis. There are things that we can do to help uh, promote healing and function, but listening to our bodies because they are our instruments is the most the most sage advice I feel like I can offer you today. While we did give some ideas of things you might try, and I certainly do encourage you to do those things. My number one charge for you today is just to be very very mindful and listening to your voice and rest and hydrate and it's so very important, and it will keep you, the way that you and your voice behave today affects how you and your voice behave several days from now. So if there are any questions, I would love to hear those before we move towards our conclusion today.
Thank you so much for your phrasing the notion of if you're asking yourself the question, am I sick? Should I sing? The answer is just plain no. It's I'm a conductor by trade. We almost always have a sick bay in the corner, and I think I may, especially with after COVID, I may just abolish sick bay entirely. It's like, no, if you think you should be in sick bay, go home, rest the muscles, the musculature. That's fantastic.
And we want you and I think I can be so bold as to speak for you, Gary, too, that as leaders, as conductors or directors or producers or intendants of an opera company, whoever it is that is responsible for these rehearsals or performances, the health of our musicians and performers is very much at the top of the list, and we want the best for you in your singing, more than we want 16 instead of 15 sopranos singing this rehearsal, if that makes sense.
Which brings back to your starting point about our bodies are our instruments, which is why whenever I'm in a rehearsal with an orchestra and they have these whatever box they're carrying with them, I always volunteer to hold the door open because my instrument weighs more than theirs.
Right.
Even the double bass, right?
Right. Yes, indeed.
I don't have any other comments here. Do you have anything else to add? I can wrap it up.
Well, I just wanted to call attention to these are just some of the recent publications. The oldest of which is Mary Beth Bunch's book from 2009, but the rest of these materials are really hot off the press. These are some of the preeminent vocal researchers and pedagogues that are doing wonderful work right now. We're very, very fortunate to have Dr. Kari Reagan, whose book is mentioned in the fourth position here, in our own Seattle area vocal community, a very respected studio teacher, masterclass presenter, clinician, singing voice specialist. I mentioned that specialty, and she has that. Dr. Scott McCoy's book, Your Voice and Inside View. Now, this is a vocal pedagogy book. In fact, I'll speak for really 3 of the 4 books here, not the anatomy book, but the other 3 are pedagogy books. So there is a definite focus on the teaching and instruction and those types of concepts in voice. But I still, these are wonderful materials. If you have an opportunity to peruse, I feel like the Theodore Diamond book is beneficial for all of us voice users, just to have some pictures of what things look like inside. And obviously in our age of the wealth of the internet, there are wonderful other resources too. But I will just say before I let you wrap up that I just thank you, Gary and Scott, for asking me to come today, and for all of you who have tuned in and even perhaps will watch this webinar after today, for your time and your art, and continue keep the song going. We've been saying for the last year, find those ways that bring you joy in singing. Even in those moments when you can't sing with your full voice, it doesn't mean we have to lose any of that joy. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ryan. This is fascinating. It makes me want to go back and watch those videos where you can actually see like 4 people singing the Victoria O Manu Mysterium, and watch as all of their
Right.
vocal folds all at the same time. It's mind-blowing. This has been wonderfully informative. Thank you. Thank you to all of our participants for your questions and your contributions. The next offering of the Emerald Choral Academy will take place on Wednesday, May 5th, I believe, when the Emerald Ensemble's executive director, wonderful baritone Scott Kovacs, who is here in the room, I'm pointing up here because that's where he is to me right now. Yeah, and Scott will teach about. Oh, wow, I don't even. I'm drawing a blank, and I didn't.
Everyday vocal health is.
Oh, right, you're treating everyday vocal health,
everyday vocal
which would be a wonderful support to what we've heard today. And,
a lot of wonderful overlaps with what we just talked about.
It's great. Yeah, we at the Emerald Ensemble are very grateful for the enthusiasm of all of you, our audiences and our supporters. As the Emerald Choral Academy continues, you can help to support these efforts by donating at emeraldensemble.org. You can also let us know of topics that you would like to see discussed in the future. We are about to start planning the 3rd season of the Academy for this fall, potentially. So now is the time to let us know if you have requests. In the meantime, I am Gary Cannon. On behalf of the Emerald Ensemble, I wish you good physical, mental, and musical health. Thank you all very much.